Hi guys, I'm so excited to be here with all of you today. Thank you so much for inviting me. My name is Dr. Monique Ruberu. I'm a pro-life OBGYN from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And I am so blessed to, number one, be of our faith, to have a complete understanding of who God is and how much He loves us and how He created each and every one of us perfectly. When you think about it, the creation of the human being is the greatest gift that God has ever given to us. And as an OBGYN physician and somebody who deals with infertility for many of my patients, trying to help them to conceive pregnancies, I have a keen understanding of how much goes into a person actually being conceived. And you know, for a person to be conceived, this couple has to be of the mindset to be able to come together, and then that particular sperm, that particular egg has to be able to unite, and then that so many chemical reactions have to take place. The uterus has to be ready to accept that embryo, and that embryo has to be able to grow. So it truly is miraculous that each and every one of you are even here today. It's such a challenge for so many people to even be able to conceive. So I want you to understand the importance of pro-life, not just in the idea that we need to go out there and we need to stop this grave evil. That is absolutely important. But why is it so important that we are stopping this grave evil? What is it exactly that we are protecting? We are protecting that innocent child and the mother and the families that are impacted by abortion. How many of you know somebody or have heard of somebody in your circles, or have a friend or a family member or anybody that you have ever come in contact with that has had an abortion? How many of you? So many hands have gone up. This is so common. I want to let you know that every single person in your life, you are going to encounter somebody who has been touched by abortion in some way. And oftentimes it is this deep, dark secret that isn't let out. Oftentimes in families, something happens and somebody becomes pregnant, and there is so much shame and upset and sadness associated with this that it's hushed under the carpet and it's hidden, and then an abortion happens and they try and act like it's never happened. But I'm telling you, it is much more common than you would even believe. In communities like ours, where you would think there's no way that could possibly happen in my church, there's no way that could possibly happen in my community, I want you to know that it does. And because of this, I believe that it is one of the most important topics that everybody has an understanding of, so that they can speak about this, so that they can have an opinion. Because the worst thing in life is to walk through life and to see something happening and to not even have an opinion about it. As Christians, we are called to stand up and to be brave. When we think about everything that Jesus Christ went through for us in His life, especially on Good Friday as we are approaching Easter, when we think of all of the brutality that He was willing to undergo, all of the abuse, spitting upon, being scourged on the front and the back, carrying a cross, having shards of wood going into His skin, all of these things that He did for us just so that we could get into heaven, those are all of the sacrifices that He made for each and every one of us. And so it's our responsibility as Christians to stand up for everything that He teaches us to be true. To never back down, but to do it with love, to do it with compassion. And I know that the opposite side, the pro-abortion people who are pushing the agenda, who are teaching everything they possibly can to you to try and indoctrinate you and tell you that abortion is safe, that abortion is medicine, that abortion is necessary, that abortion is kind, that abortion is generous. It's all lies. And I'm going to try and explain to you why I, as an OBGYN physician, truly believe that abortion is never, ever, ever necessary. Even in medical conditions, abortion is not necessary. And I saw a lot of people just kind of like, what? How is abortion not necessary in medical conditions? Well, we're going to get into that. First of all, it's important to understand how abortions happen. Because quite often what they're saying is, you know, this is just a clump of cells. And this clump of cells has no feelings and is not important. And you're trying to prioritize this clump of cells over this woman's life. That is so unkind. But truly, it is not just a clump of cells. Each and every one of us began as an embryo. From the moment of conception, where the DNA of the mother and the father is united, this is an individual human being that is just very small in size. Every single thing that that human being needs is present at that time. It is the same as you or me. It's just much, much younger. And that little human being is rapidly growing so quickly. When it comes together within the first 24 hours, it is splitting, and then it is splitting again, and then it is splitting again, and again, and again, and again. By the time most women even know that they're pregnant, they have missed their first period. And that is at least 4 weeks into their pregnancy, right? From the time of conception. When that happens, that heart is beating very soon after. At 4 weeks from the time of conception, you have a heartbeat. You have a heart that is already pumping blood through that body. When women are having abortions, they're not having abortions of embryos. They have no idea that they're pregnant oftentimes when they have just an embryo that is growing within them. It is a living, growing human being. There are several different kinds of abortions, and I think it's really important that all of you have an understanding of these kinds of abortions, and I'm really sorry because this is not an easy thing to hear, but I think it's really, really necessary. I was in Mass this morning and I was like, Jesus, what do you want me to tell them? And that was the one thing that hit me so hard. And I was like, really? Do I have to talk about that? And he's like, yes. They need to know. Because most people think that abortion is a gentle, kind, loving procedure that people go through. But it really, truly isn't. The earliest possible abortion is a suction abortion where they use a vacuum, which is 30 times the strength of a vacuum that you use in your house. They open up the cervix, they place this vacuum cannula into the uterus, and that little preborn baby is there. On ultrasound, you can see the baby trying to escape, and then it gets sucked bit by bit into this vacuum, and it gets torn to pieces. The second type of abortion happens later on, when the baby is too large to actually go through this vacuum. They reach in with a clamp and they grab whatever piece, whatever body part they can, and they literally pull it off and put it on a tray. And then they reach in and they grab the next part and they pull it off and they put it on a tray. And they reach in and they grab the next part and they pull it off and they put it on a tray. And then finally, after they have removed all the arms, the legs, the body, what's left is the head. And they reach in and they grab it and they squash it and they know that it's the head because the brain comes out. It is a brutal, horrible procedure. The next kind of abortion is even later on. And there are places in this country and all over the world where abortions are legal up to the point of delivery. So that means a preterm baby who could end up in the NICU would still be able to be aborted. A baby who is 39 weeks, and all it needs is just to be delivered. And then there's so many people who would love to adopt that child, instead is aborted. And the way that they do that is they inject the heart, and they give the baby a heart attack, and then they have the mother deliver normally. This is not a kind and gentle procedure. This is a brutal, evil, horrible, destructive procedure. And it's very, very important that we understand this. Now, I'm not saying that the people who are working inside of an abortion center are evil. I'm not saying that the women who are choosing abortion are evil. I'm saying that they are making sad choices. They are making horrible choices because they are blinded. And it's our job as Christians to love these people, to pray for these people, to respond kindly to these people and offer them the assistance that they need so that they can make another choice. I think the most impactful thing that you guys can do as a church, as youth groups, as a community, is to organize yourselves and show up and pray outside of abortion centers, because I promise you, this is much more than what we see as human beings. This is an absolute spiritual battle. When you show up outside of an abortion center and you show up with a rosary and you are out there asking Our Lady to intercede and you are praying, I promise you, it's like you have an arrow and you are drawing back and then you are letting go. Each Hail Mary is like an arrow and you are pinging off all of these demons that are there. And this is such an intense battle because human beings are God's greatest creation. He created us to be in His likeness, in His image. And Satan is after every single soul. And he is trying to destroy humanity and destroy human beings. And we see it everywhere, right? We see it in how Satan infiltrates the churches. We see it in how Satan draws children away from their families. We see it through all sorts of instances, through pornography, through abortion, through all of these different ways. But the solution for all of that is prayer. The solution for all of that is love and kindness and compassion. And so people often ask me, well, why are people choosing abortion? It is, number one, fear. People make bad choices, right? If you are in the line for an abortion, it's not that you are in a beautiful marriage and you have chosen to have a child in that marriage. No. It is a woman who has been in a relationship where she has made a choice with her partner and they have now become pregnant. It is a woman who has been told by her physician that she is ill and that she needs to choose abortion. It is a woman that has a prenatal diagnosis of some sort of genetic abnormality or something wrong with the baby, and so she needs to have an abortion because that's the kinder, gentler thing. It's the woman who has been abused or raped in some way or fashion, and now she is pregnant and she's being told that she needs to have an abortion. It is the woman who is told that she is in university and that she can't complete her studies if she has a child, and so she should have an abortion. It's the woman who has been told that she doesn't have enough brains, or she doesn't have enough money, or she doesn't have enough support. It's always a fear, it's a lack. If I have this baby, it's going to cause a burden. If I have this baby, I won't be able to do this, or I won't be able to do that. But I promise you, there is no reason ever that cannot be overcome. Because in every single town, all over the world, there are people who are pro-life, who are willing to be that support. They're willing to step up and help. They're willing to offer solutions. And that's what our role is. Our role is to show up at these places and lovingly, kindly, prayerfully offer assistance to these women. And it absolutely works. Because as an OB/GYN physician, I've been blessed to also be involved with 40 Days for Life. How many of you guys have heard of 40 Days for Life? A few of you, okay. 40 Days for Life is a beautiful outreach, and twice a year they have a 40-day campaign where people from different churches will take a day and they will cover a day outside of the abortion center. And every hour that abortion center is open, there are people out there in prayer, asking God to intercede, to change hearts, to change minds, to change the hearts and minds not only of the women who are going in or the men who are going in, but also of the workers, also of the abortionists, also of the people walking by, witnessing you there praying. To be able to give people the strength to stand up and to say that this is not acceptable, that these millions of babies, like we heard, are being slaughtered every single day. If you think about it, like, if your grandfather had been aborted, how many people would be missing? Every single life is precious. If your grandfather was aborted, at least 100 people would be missing, right? If you just think down the passageway, your grandfather, then your grandfather had children, and all of those children had children, and all of those children have children, and it just goes on and on and on. But that one person is so, so important. So I just want you all to know, like, how to respond, because they do have really good arguments that make you feel like you're a bad person if you say that abortion is wrong. And quite often they will say things that are like, well, you obviously care more about this lump of cells than you do about women. And they'll say things like, men of all people should not ever have a say in this because you don't even have a uterus. But why were men created? Men are created to protect. Men are created to provide. The men are the ones who should be standing up before anybody else. Y'all were created to be the shelter, the leaders, the guiders, the ones that everybody looks to have the courage and the strength. Y'all are the ones who are surrounding the troops and encouraging everybody to take the next step forward, to trust in God. If y'all don't have the strength and the peace to stand up and to lead the charge on things like this, then who will? It is so important because every man comes from a woman. Every man is so deeply invested in the women in their lives. Every man has a mother. Most men have sisters. Many men have daughters. And if you're not willing to stand up for your daughters and your mothers and your sisters, to be able to say, no, this is a grave, grave evil, and we have to speak out against this, then who will? And the thing is, when a woman comes by to the abortion center, if there's somebody praying outside and standing there with a sign saying, we will help you, you don't have to choose this today, we would love to be of assistance to you. If she doesn't see that, oftentimes they're walking in and they're saying, God, just show me a sign if you don't want me to do this. And if that sidewalk is empty, there is no chance It's silence. It's like this silent nod of approval towards them. This is okay, nobody cares. Nobody cares about you. You're not important. You should definitely do this. But when we show up, and we show up with love, it makes such a difference. So let's talk about a few of those topics, like I was saying. So one would be, they'll say some really silly things. And the thing that I want you guys all to remember is that the truth is always on our side, right? When you're arguing for the truth, it's much easier to argue because you know that this is the truth. So when they say things like, it's not even human, like what exactly makes somebody human? Isn't being human just the fact that your mother was human and your father is human, so genetically you're human? So you're human no matter how big you are, right? Does that make sense? So you can't say that it's not human, whether it's an embryo or whether it's a fetus or whether it's a toddler or whether it's a teenager or whether it's an elderly person. Humanity is based on who your parents are, right? So that one's out the door. Then they'll say, well, it's not a person. Like, well, what exactly makes a person? Like, well, you have to be able to have your own thoughts and you have to be able to make decisions. I'm like, well, what about people who are disabled? Should they all be killed simply because they may not be able to make decisions for themselves? What about infants? You know, they're not making decisions for themselves. They're very dependent on us and they need help. Well, what about the fact that they're just like a parasite and they are completely feeding off of the mother and she doesn't have to support them if she doesn't want to. As parents, we have an absolute need to take care of our children. That is innate in each and every one of us. When you have a child, you are responsible for that child. Whether or not you feel good about it at that time, feelings are not the issue here. Feelings change. You might be sad today and happy tomorrow, but that is never a reason to end a life. It's never a reason to hurt anybody and kill a child just because you don't feel good about it. Well, the difference between this child and another child is that that child is wanted and this one is unwanted. So it's okay to discard of this one. There are many people who came from very difficult situations where at one time or another, their parents may not have felt great about the fact that they were alive, but they still deserve to be alive. It's not a great idea to kill people just because you think that they're unwanted. They may be unwanted by this individual at that moment, but there are so many other individuals in this world that would want them. Oftentimes when women are going into the abortion center and we're offering them the idea of adoption or their idea of adoption may be very different from ours, but I want you guys to understand that there is such a thing as open adoption. In open adoption, it is possible for the mother to give birth to the child, and then the family that adopts this child will have an open relationship with that mother. So that mother can still know her child. That child will grow up knowing that their birth mother is actually a hero because their birth mother allowed them to live and allowed them to be with this family who could financially, emotionally support them. So they grow up actually embracing their birth mother. Quite often that birth mother kind of becomes a part of the adopted family. It's a beautiful thing, but quite often people that think about adoption are thinking more along the lines of foster, where their children were taken away from them, or as small children themselves, they were placed in the foster system. And yes, our foster system sadly is broken. But that does not mean that adoption is a bad thing. Many people will adopt through foster, and there are many loving families that are foster parents, but we need more loving families to participate with foster as well, so that the situations improve there. When it comes to medical conditions, oftentimes people will say, oh, you know, this child has Down syndrome or trisomy 18 or has anencephaly, has some sort of medical problem that will limit its life and not allow it to live a full life. So we should instead abort that child. And what I would say is every single individual, no matter what their shape is, what their size is, what medical issues they have, each and every one of them is precious. Each and every one of them can contribute in some way. If you think about, I don't know how many of you know a child that has Down syndrome. Can you just raise your hands if you do? So those of you who know a child who has Down syndrome, in my experience, every person I know who has Down syndrome is like the light of the home. There is nobody that ever has an issue with that child. That child brings joy, brings peace, brings love. When you go to a family function and the grumpiest person in the place will get along with the child with Down syndrome. It's not an issue that person was given to us as a gift. That is a light in this world. But then there are countries that will brag that they have eliminated Down syndrome. There is no way to medically eliminate Down syndrome except to abort every single Down syndrome child. So basically what they're saying is if you have a diagnosis of Down syndrome, you are killing your child. And that is how we have eliminated Down syndrome in our country. 90% of Down syndrome babies are aborted. 90%. It is so sad. There are people who will say if you have a trisomy 18 baby, which is a much more severe illness than Down syndrome, that you should abort. But if you look at Senator Santorum, he has a child with trisomy 18. And yes, there have been many instances where that child has had life and death circumstances, and they have had to go and get medical care, and it's been very scary at times. But when you read the writings of his children that have grown up with this little girl, Bella, it is so beautiful to see what they say. Bella is the most beautiful part of our family. Bella is the reason that we cherish every day, because we realize that every day is not a guarantee. We don't always know how long Bella is going to be with us. But we feel so blessed to have her for yet another day. Bella brings joy. Bella brings love. Bella brings smiles. I'm telling you, the families that have children with disabilities love their children. They don't consider them to be a horrible addition to their family. They cherish those children. So that is not a reason ever to feel like those children should be aborted. I have patients in my office who have been given the diagnosis of terminal illnesses for their babies. And straight away, the first thing that they're told by their doctor is, you should have an abortion because it's the kinder, gentler thing to do. And as we went through already, now you guys all know how abortions are done, and there is nothing kind or gentle about it. And so quite often when patients hear this from their physicians, they will move towards abortion. But there are a few who make the brave choice to allow their child to live as long as possible and to honor that child's life. One of my good friends was in this situation. She and her boyfriend, she was in university, they became pregnant. She came from a very pro-life family, and so they knew they weren't going to have an abortion just because they made a mistake and they became pregnant in university. But she got into a car accident and she was concerned for the baby. So she went to the hospital and she had an ultrasound, and in the ultrasound, they told her, hey, there's something wrong and you need to go to your doctor. So when she went to her doctor, the doctor looked at the report and said, your baby has anencephaly. Anencephaly is when a portion of the skull is not there and the brain does not develop properly. So these babies oftentimes will not live more than a few hours after birth. And so this mother, thank God she was there with her mom. And straight away the doctor said, so I recommend abortion. And the mother said, no, we're not doing an abortion. We're a pro-life family. And she said, well, I have never managed a case of anencephaly, so I guess we'll just monitor you, but I don't have anything else to offer you. And so this girl went home with no support from that physician, no community to turn to know what to expect, nothing. But she was Catholic, and she decided that she was just going to pray and trust. And they came up with an idea to honor their child Shane. And so what they decided was they made a list of all the things that they did as kids in Philadelphia, a list of all the places that they went, and they said, let's do all of those things with Shane while he's inside of my belly. We don't know how long he has, but let's go to the shore, let's go apple picking, let's go and celebrate birthdays, let's go do cheesesteaks, let's go to the Phillies games, let's do all of these things. And they made a list, and that actually ended up going viral. And they had a little website, and people were really impressed with what they were doing for this child Shane. And even when Shane was born, he lived for a few hours, and during that time they held Shane, they read stories to Shane, they took pictures of Shane, and they spent that time, they were able to bury Shane and honor Shane. Now, if instead they had taken the doctor's advice and they had had an abortion, what would have happened to Shane? Shane would have been ripped to pieces, Shane would have been thrown in the trash, and that would have been the end of it. The mom would have been told that you should shout your abortion because you should be proud that you can move on with your life and you're not held down by this and that you made the right choice. But this mother has the peace in her heart that never at any instance did she ever do anything to harm her child. She only tried to protect her child every step of the way, to try and give her child every opportunity, to give God every opportunity to heal her child. And one day when she goes to heaven and she meets Shane in heaven, then she will be in complete peace. And even now, every anniversary of Shane's birth, she runs a race, she has a birthday party, she continues to go on. His little brothers and sisters know all about Shane, and they all celebrate Shane. That is so much more beautiful, so much more healing for that family. Sometimes you'll hear, oh, this mother had cancer and so she had to have an abortion. Or this mother had a cardiac illness and she had to have an abortion. Or this mother had fibroids and she had to have an abortion. Well, I had a patient who had fibroids, and the fibroids were very large, and she was in Africa. She had moved over to Africa, and she reached out to me from there. And she said, Dr. Ribeiro, I'm pregnant. I'm 13 weeks pregnant. And I have very large fibroids in my uterus, and every physician here is telling me that I need to have an abortion. And she said, my husband is telling me that I should have an abortion because they're telling him that if this baby is born early, that it'll have disabilities. And he's never had any disabilities in his family. And so he doesn't want to have a child with disabilities in his family. And she said, so Dr. Ribeiro, I'm going to come back to the United States. I want to be around people who will support me and help me. And so she came to the United States and she got involved with prenatal care. And the most important thing is that here in the United States and also elsewhere in the world, there are specific physicians who are maternal fetal medicine doctors, who are OBGYNs who have done further training so that they can take care of moms and babies in high-risk pregnancies. That is their job. So every step along the way in her pregnancy, they monitored her fibroids, they monitored her uterus, they monitored her baby. And when she came to the point that it was unsafe for her to continue in the pregnancy, they made a decision to deliver early. And that's why I say there's never any reason for an abortion. You can always choose in any medical situation to monitor the pregnancy as far along as possible and then to deliver the baby early. That baby may not survive if it is at a point in its life where it can't survive outside of the womb, but then that baby can still be honored, that baby can be buried, that baby can be mourned. That mother and that family will have the opportunity to hold that child. But instead, if they choose to have an abortion, that baby is ripped to pieces and thrown into the trash. And that's the end of the story. So that is why I say it's never medically necessary to participate in abortion. I'm trying to think of any other instances. A big one that they would say is rape and incest. And they would say, if a mother is raped, she should not have to carry that child. There are actual studies that have been done on mothers who have chosen to give birth versus mothers who chose abortion in the case of rape and incest. And what they find is that emotionally, mentally, these mothers do far better if they give birth. And the reason for that is they have already been traumatized by someone. They have already been hurt by someone, but now in the case of abortion, they are choosing to hurt somebody else. They are choosing to end the life of their own child. Have you ever thought about what happens to the rapist? Why is it that the rapist, when he is found, he only gets to be put in jail? Nobody is killing him for having raped someone. So why is it that the innocent child inside of the womb gets ripped limb from limb and thrown in the trash? Because of the sins of his father? It doesn't make sense. There are so many people that I know. I don't know if y'all have heard of the Radiance Foundation, Ryan Baumberger. There are many, many people. I have so many friends who were conceived in rape. And then they were adopted or their parents kept them and they raised them. I have one friend, she was conceived in rape and then sadly she was raped and she conceived her son in rape. And she walked through life and people said, oh, you shouldn't be alive or your son shouldn't be alive. But they are such important members of our society. She does so much good for our society. She helps so many women. She helps so many children. And her life is precious and important, as is the life of her son. She then went on to get married to a beautiful man who loves her and accepts her son. And now they have a beautiful family and they have 2 more children. So just because somebody is conceived in rape, it does not make that baby a bad baby. It does not mean that that child is tainted in some way or sinful in some way. That child deserves a chance at life just as much as anybody else. So I think I've been talking a little bit too long, starting to look a little bit glassy-eyed. So I'm ready to just take any questions. I know that you guys might have some questions that were already collected in advance. Okay, great.
So the first question that the 11th grade decided to ask you was, when you decided to become an OBGYN, were you called to the pro-life movement from the beginning, or did your calling develop after you started working in the field? Also, could you talk about your practice and how you faced conflicts surrounding your faith in the medical system in the United States?
Okay, awesome. So I have always been kind of personally pro-life. However, I was very much pro-life, but I was pro-life for myself when I was growing up, when I was many of y'all's age. I was pro-life for myself, saying, okay, I would personally never have an abortion, but I don't feel like I could tell somebody else what they should or shouldn't do. I don't feel like in the case of rape and incest, I really know what I should say in that case. So that's kind of where I was all the way until God did an amazing thing in my life. So I had been married for 10 years, and unfortunately, we found ourselves in a very difficult place in our marriage, and our marriage was on the brink of divorce. And God brought people into my life that really helped me to understand the importance of marriage, and the importance of marriage not just for myself and my husband, but especially for my children, for them to be able to see what a good marriage looks like, so that they would have a role model as to how to model their future marriages. How the importance of the vows that we took, and that triune between God and my spouse and myself, the importance of honoring that. And so in fighting for our marriage and saving our marriage, I decided I needed to do something beautiful for God. I needed to do something completely outside of my box. And I encountered a book by Abby Johnson. How many of you guys have heard of Abby Johnson and the movie Unplanned? Yeah, so many of you guys have not seen Unplanned. Unplanned is a wonderful movie that every single one of you should watch. It's on Amazon Prime for free. But Unplanned, it was a book that I found at my church, and when I read this book, it planted the seeds about pro-life. Because when I was in university, I went to a Catholic university, and people would go and pray outside of abortion centers, but I was under the false belief that they were showing up outside of abortion centers in an unkind way. I thought that they were showing up and yelling at people or condemning people, and so I never wanted to have anything to do with that. But in reading Abby Johnson's book, Unplanned, I realized that it was possible to show up outside of an abortion center and show kindness and compassion and love, and to invite those women to be like that last moment person at the end of the cliff before they're about to make the worst decision of their life, willing to extend a hand and willing to offer love. And that really kind of struck a chord within me, and I decided to go and pray outside of an abortion center to kind of pay God back for saving my marriage. And when I showed up there, I encountered people who were praying outside, and one of the gentlemen actually gave me a book about NAPRO technology. NAPRO technology is a way of addressing every GYN issue without the use of contraceptives, without the use of IVF. And I had never heard of it in all of my medical training. And so when I received that book and I read it, I realized that there was a way for me to practice OBGYN medicine without the use of contraceptives, and completely in alignment with God's plan for us. And so that was really life-changing. From there, I went on to make the decision to go for training in NAPRO technology. And then I decided to stop writing for contraceptives, and I decided to base my practice on this kind of root cause medicine. And that caused a lot of stir in my hospital, because although I was practicing in a Catholic hospital where it should have been completely accepted, the fact that I was willing to give up contraceptives made a lot of people angry. And so many of them refused to work with me. Administration refused to stand up for me. So I had my pay docked by about $30,000. I was told that I had to serve the people who wouldn't work with me, and that I had to work for them. And then I was basically kind of pushed to the side a little bit. But in all of that, God had an amazing plan. It was so beautiful how he did this. Slowly, slowly, in that little bit of persecution, he prepared me for where I am now. And initially it was, okay, you've got to give up working on labor and delivery, delivering your own patients. And then it was, okay, you've got to give up labor and delivery completely and focus on gynecology and infertility. Okay, then it was COVID showed up, and because I'm a pro-life OBGYN and I didn't want to participate with the COVID vaccines because all of them used aborted fetal cell lines in order to produce those vaccines, I refused the COVID vaccine, and then I lost privileges at that Catholic hospital. And when I lost privileges at the Catholic hospital, they basically said, you need to leave this space. And then God provided a beautiful space for me within days where I was able to practice without the COVID vaccine and still take care of patients. But if that persecution hadn't happened along the way, then I wouldn't be here right now. Because all of that is what led to my slowly giving up my thoughts of how I needed to have my practice, and I was allowing God to show me what exactly he wanted of me. And he helped me to become an owner of my own practice so that I had control over my patients and my space and what I taught and the conversations that I was able to have in my office. Because even showing up outside of an abortion center as a part of the Catholic Hospital Center, I would get my hand slapped by administration. They'd say, you shouldn't represent us outside of the abortion center. I'm like, I'm not representing you, I'm representing myself. I'm a pro-life OBGYN. And when I decided to not write contraceptives, and when I decided to speak to patients about chastity, or speak to patients about marriage, or speak to patients about contraceptives and removing IUDs and all of these things, now in my own office that I own, that's sacred space, I could, help my patients in whatever way that I feel called to. And nobody is telling me that I can't say something, or I can't do something, or I can't treat with herbs, or I can't look at root cause medicine as causes, or I have to use contraceptives. So that's been a huge blessing for me. The next question.
My name is Anjali Paz. My question is, it is argued that abortion is a way to gain freedom and control over their lives. How do we respond to that perspective?
So in choosing abortion for freedom, the woman is oftentimes so deeply scarred. So most people think, okay, I'm gonna have this abortion so I can continue on with my education, or I can continue on to have the freedom to travel or the freedom to work as I would want. The truth of the situation is, if that woman allowed her child to live, she could still accomplish all of those things. It may be a slightly different path, but then she is not left with the trauma of having ended her child's life, and the child obviously is allowed to live, right? So two major bonuses. I have encountered so many women in my life who have chosen abortion, and instantly at that moment, it's a sigh of relief. It's like, okay, I can go back to school. Or, okay, nobody will have to know about this. But many years later, when they see children who are this age of their child which was aborted, when they go for baby showers, when abortion comes up in elections, when abortion is spoken of in public, they have this really deep sorrow. So many women who choose abortion are harmed by abortion. They're emotionally harmed, they're mentally harmed, and then they're told that they should be proud of their abortion, and that they should shout their abortion. So it's very, very challenging for them. There's also the physical harm that may be tied to abortion. There are many women who have died because of abortion, because they've had their cervix ruptured or torn, they've had bits of the babies that have been left behind, and then they become septic. Nowadays, the most popular kind of abortion is actually the abortion pill abortion, which I need all of y'all to know that the abortion pill can be reversed within 72 hours. Personally, I've done several of those for patients, doing one this weekend actually, and those babies survive with no harm whatsoever if we can get to them early enough. But when women are taking the abortion pill, oftentimes they have no idea how far along they are even. They have no idea if the baby is in their uterus or in the tubes. They have no ultrasound before they start this procedure. They may be just getting on a website and saying, I need the abortion pill, and then somebody in another state is mailing it to them through the mail. If they're in college, oftentimes they're doing this by themselves in the college bathroom in those dorms with no privacy, and they're in severe pain and they're hemorrhaging, and then they deliver their baby into the toilet, and then they have to flush the toilet. It is the most traumatic thing. There are so many women who call the crisis pregnancy centers afterwards because they're not given any sort of support whatsoever, and they're fishing their babies out, and they're like, what do I do with this baby? What do I do with this? And then they're putting them in their freezer, or they're putting them in a pot, or they're trying to bury it, and they don't know what to do. So yeah, I don't think that it brings freedom. I think it brings a lot of trauma.
Thank you.
Are there medical alternatives or support options that you offer patients that line up with your Catholic beliefs, and how do you go about this?
So like I was mentioning, I have training in NAPRO technology, and I also base my office on root cause medicine. So in the office, patients are often, if they go to a typical gynecologist, if they have any issue, abnormal bleeding, painful cycles, PMS symptoms, whatever, fibroids, endometriosis, the main solution that they're offered is a contraceptive pill. But contraceptive pills are so bad for your body. They increase your risk of cancer. They just act as a band-aid and cover up the symptoms, but they never address the underlying issue. So the underlying issue just ferments and ferments and ferments. And then when you get off of the contraceptive, then it shows its head again, but it's usually far worse. So in our office, what we do is we do a lot of investigation to try and find out exactly why that issue is happening. And quite often it's just toxicity in the body. They're not able to eliminate toxins, so they have a buildup of excess estrogen, and then that excess estrogen is causing issues for the patient. And so trying to reverse all of that toxicity and just heal the patient from a root cause mentality rather than trying to cover it up with Band-Aids. So lots of solutions.
Given that some vaccines have been developed or tested using cell lines derived from aborted fetuses, how do you navigate the moral concerns surrounding their uses, especially as a pro-life advocate?
I think the information about vaccines is developing more and more and more, right? And when I had my children, unfortunately, I did not know that information. When I was being trained in university, I did not know that information. And so now that I look back, knowing what I know, especially after the COVID vaccine and refusing that vaccine and then going on to refuse other vaccines, I have realized that many of the studies that have been done on vaccinated versus non-vaccinated children, the non-vaccinated children are actually the healthier children. And so personally, I do not promote the use of the vaccines that have aborted fetal cell lines in them. I'm not a fan of many vaccines. So there's always a lot of other things that can be done naturally to boost the immune system and help somebody become healthy based on diet and exercise and vitamins and supplements and stuff like that to protect somebody rather than just using the normal vaccination schedule.
How can someone who holds pro-life views engage in respectful conversations with others who support abortion rights, especially when trying to stand firm in their beliefs but without alienating others?
Always trying to remember that every single person has been created by God. Every single person has dignity. And sometimes you have to look at them as they were when they were small, right? Before they were indoctrinated themselves in those pro-choice beliefs and the pro-abortion beliefs and everything else. And try and have a conversation with them where you can find some common ground so that you can show them that they really truly are a kind and loving person in many aspects of their life. Oftentimes I will pray outside of the abortion centers in downtown Philadelphia, and about 20 or 30 pro-abortion people will show up to counter-protest us praying outside of the abortion center. And they are very lewd and unkind, and they say all sorts of horrible things to us and make fun of us and have signs and try and prevent us from talking to the women that are there. I try and pray for each and every one of those people, but especially I try and listen when they're talking so I can understand who they are, because I know that God created each and every one of them with purpose as well, right? And unfortunately, Satan has blinded them, and so they're believing something that is not of God. And so this one girl in particular, it was really amazing because when I started listening to what she was saying, I realized that she had a beautiful heart. And the reason that she was trying to promote abortion was because she herself had been through abusive relationships in her life, and she had become pregnant in those abusive relationships. And she did not want to imagine her child being abused by her spouse, and so she didn't feel like she could protect the child, so she thought it was better to end the child's life rather than let that child live. And so when I talked to her, I said, I am so sorry that you were ever in that situation. I'm so sorry that we didn't know you at that time and we couldn't surround you with people who would protect you from that man who was trying to hurt you. And I am so sorry that other people made you feel like your only option to protect your child was to end your child's life. You are a beautiful person. You are a kind and loving person. I know that you participate in feeding the homeless. And I was like, is there anything that I can do to help you with that, to support you with that? And she was like, you're interested in feeding the homeless? And I'm like, yeah, I love to feed the homeless. I feed the homeless all the time. And so the next time that I showed up at the abortion center, I brought food to give her to feed the homeless. And so doing things like that, like you can't look at the person with an opposite view as an enemy. You have to try and find something good about them that you can respect, even though they have these views that are different from you. You have to try and find some common ground. It doesn't mean that you have to back off on your beliefs. You know what is true, and you can stand for the truth. But fighting with someone and trying to degrade them and trying to like cut down their arguments and win the argument, it never wins in the long run. In the long run, we have to make a connection with somebody so that they can reach a place where they can actually have a conversation with us. And in that conversation, they can see that we're not really bad people, even though we don't believe the same things that they believe. And then they can start to feel the love and maybe have a conversion themselves and have an understanding. Oftentimes also, any situation, anything that they say to you, rather than trying to fight them straight off, ask a question and see if they can explain themselves. Have them talk so that they can hear themselves and they can hear the nonsense that they're actually saying. And then relate it to a slightly older child. So it's okay with you to end the life of a child because a mother doesn't have food. So is it okay if a mother has a 1-year-old for her to kill that child because she doesn't have food?
Beyond abortion, what other aspects of the pro-life movement are important to you as a Catholic OBGYN? How do you advocate for the dignity of life in other areas such as prenatal care, support for mothers, and care for the elderly?
So as a pro-life OBGYN, we believe that life is sacred from conception all the way to natural death. So everything that falls in between there is also considered an important thing to stand up for with regards to pro-life. So when people are participating in euthanasia and ending people's lives early because they have any sort of medical issue or depression or sadness, or they're on hospice and you're pushing drugs to end their lives early, that is also not correct when you're withholding food from a person. anything in between, anything that harms life, anything that ends life prematurely, those are all pro-life issues, and we should all be aware of all of these things, not just abortion, but providing mothers with the support that they need. And I think in the pro-life community, we do a good job of this. There are so many more crisis pregnancy centers, pregnancy care centers, maternity homes available than there are abortion centers. We have them outnumbered significantly. We have communities who are willing to support women with diapers, with baby showers, with help in whatever way they need. The issue is you have to be able to connect with those women and then be able to sit down with those women and find out exactly why they're choosing abortion so that we can understand how to support them in the best possible way. And that is happening. So I believe that we need to do all of that. Respecting human life all the way along is important.
What advice do you have for pre-health career students or those interested in research as they navigate their education and career paths?
Oftentimes I'll have students come up to me and say, Dr. Ribeiro, you're a pro-life OBGYN, it's great. I feel like I could come to your office and shadow with you and whatnot, but is it okay for me to even try to become a physician because I have to go through medical school and I have to go through residency? And I may be faced with a lot of very challenging things are happening around me that I don't agree with. And so I would say, number one, if God has placed a desire in your heart to be a practitioner in the medical field, a physician, a PA, a nurse practitioner, a nurse, whatever it may be, a researcher, always trust that God will make a way. He will always open the right doors. He will bring people around you that will help to support you. So walk forward and do that. Just make sure that there's nothing that you are doing personally that conflicts with your faith. And if there is a time that somebody is forcing you to do something that conflicts with your faith, then reach out and talk to somebody. There are so many groups available, Students for Life, lots of different groups available, the Catholic Medical Associations, and let somebody know so that somebody who is senior to you can actually stand up for you and help you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here today. The message was not just informative, but truly inspiring, reminding us of the importance of compassion and sanctity of life. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Ribeiro for sharing her wisdom with us today. Your words have been a lasting impact, and we are grateful for your time and dedication.